Hi, and welcome to the 5th lesson in the Cat and Dog series. In starting out, I want to tell you about the story of an English professor who wrote the words, "Woman, without her, man is nothing," on the blackboard and directed his students to punctuate it correctly. The men wrote, "Woman, without her, man is nothing." The women wrote, "Woman, without her, man is nothing." Punctuations can change everything. It can change what you are communicating and what you are emphasizing. And if you happen to be emphasizing the wrong syllable, your communication will come out wrong. You can communicate two totally different meanings. This is what is happening in cat and dog theology. The cat emphasizes humanity, mankind, people, while the dog puts their emphasis in a different area, on God and His glory. Two totally different messages are heard, and in fact, it leads to mixed up priorities in the Christian life. I want to show you how cats and dogs emphasize things differently in the Christian life. Now, understanding this can be a bit difficult because both cats and dogs live for the exact same things. Cats say, "I worship God for who He is and for what He's done for me." Dogs say that too. Cats say, "I want God to bless me and I want to see Him glorified." Dogs say the same thing. Cats say, "I want our church to grow and I want us to be holy." Dogs say the same thing. Dogs and cats will always say just about the same thing, but they will put different emphases on it. Let me tell you what I mean. Let's look at the first area we talked about, worship. Cats and dogs worship God for the same reasons, but they put a different emphasis on why they worship God. Cats, you see, worship God primarily for what He has done for them. Secondarily, they worship God for who He is. So a cat loves to sing songs about Jesus' death on the cross and about how their sins are taken away and about how God wants to bless them. Their songs unknowingly have a lot of personal pronouns such as me, my, and I in them, and primarily focus on their benefits. What is happening? Well, without knowing it, they're basically singing about themselves. Their Christianity has turned inward and they are, to a degree, self-centered. Their Christianity is all about them. Dogs, on the other hand, worship God primarily for who He is, secondarily, what He has done for them. A dog's focus is on God, His indescribable character, His mighty deeds, His wisdom, His attributes. Their songs don't have a lot of personal pronouns, nor do they talk much about their own benefit, but they primarily talk about God and His attributes. How do you tell the differences between the songs? Well, actually, it's quite simple. You do two things. First, compare the number of personal pronouns to the references to God. And then secondly, compare the benefits that there are to the singer to the benefits there are to God. Let's take, for example, the song, "Who Am I?" that has blessed many a believer. Listen to the lyrics and compare how many references there are to God and how many references there are to the person. And then compare the benefits to each. Let's start with the references. "Who am I that the Lord of all the earth would care to know my name, would care to feel my hurt? Who am I that the bright and morning star would choose to light the way for my ever-wandering heart?" Okay, here we are after the first verse, and it stands at a 5-to-2 ratio. 5 references to ourselves, 2 to God. Let's look at the bridge in the chorus. "Not because of who I am, but because of what you've done. Not because of what I've done, but because of who you are. I am a flower quickly fading, here today and gone tomorrow, a wave tossed in the ocean, a vapor in the wind. Still you hear me when I'm calling. Lord, you catch me when I'm falling, and you've told me who I am. I am yours. I am yours." The bridge and the chorus have 11 references to us and 8 to God. Totaling everything up, there are 16 references to us and 10 references to God. Let's look at the next verse. "Who am I that the eyes that see my sin would look on me with love and watch me rise again? Who am I that the voice that calmed the sea would call out through the rain and calm the storm in me. I counted up 5 references to us and 2 to God. That puts the total at 21 to 12. Much of the song from this point repeats itself, but in going through them all, I found 49 references to ourselves and 30 references to God. That's not exactly a 2-to-1 ratio, it's more like a 1.6 to 1 ratio, but it does point something out. The song refers to us a whole lot of times. Well, let's compare the benefits. To the singer, their name is known, their hurt is felt, their way is lit, they are heard when they call out, we assume in distress, they are caught when falling, they rise up again, they are given a new self-image, their sin is forgiven, and the storm in them is calmed. That's 9 benefits. What does God get? God is exalted because of who He is and what He has done, and indirectly exalted by acknowledging the frailty of man. That's 3 times. It's a 9 to 3 ratio, focusing more on the benefits to the singer. This is all good, but with the greater references to ourselves and our benefits, does this make the song bad or wrong? Absolutely not. Should we feel guilty singing it or even liking it? No. But it should wake us up and help us to say, gee, there are a lot of references to me and what I get in that song. That's interesting. Would a dog ever sing that song? Absolutely yes. But he would want to balance it out by singing songs that exalt and magnify God simply for who He is, not simply for what He's done for us. They know the need for a balance, and they seek it out. As a result, they would be quite happy singing Chris Tomlin's song, Indescribable. Why? Well, let's count the references to ourselves and to God, and then compare who gets what. From the highest of heights to the depths of the sea, creations revealing your majesty. From the colors of fall to the fragrance of spring, every creature unique in the song that it sings, all exclaiming. Okay, we're at the end of the first verse, and there's no reference to us. Only one reference to God, referencing His majesty. Well, let's look at the chorus. Indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing God, all-powerful, untamable. Awestruck, we fall to our knees as we humbly proclaim, you are amazing God. Okay, here we have 3 references to us and 5 to God. That totals 3 to us and 6 to God. With the next verse and then all of the repetitions, you will find a total of 12 references to us and 24 references to God. That is a clear 2-to-1 ratio, but now it is in the favor of God. There are far more references to Him than there are to us. The singer gets absolutely nothing. All they do is become awestruck and fall on their knees and worship God. Yet God is exalted multiple times for His creation and creativity. Would a cat sing that song? Absolutely. But with it, they'd sing a lot more songs with the words me, my, and I. Remember, cats primarily worship God for what He's done for them, secondarily for who He is. And don't forget, cat theology is not incorrect. These songs are not incorrect. They're just incomplete. But beware. A steady diet of cat songs can bring you step by step closer to a very self-centered Christian life. Do not let that happen. Let's look at another emphasis that is different. We talked about it earlier. Both cats and dogs want God to bless them. Both cats and dogs want to see God glorified. But they put different priorities on those 2 desires. You see, a dog puts a higher priority on seeing God glorified than he does on being blessed by God. Does a dog want God to bless him? Absolutely, yes. But it is always secondary to seeing God glorified. Mike Irvin is a personal friend who exemplifies this. He runs a heating and air conditioning business in the area. He and I are in the same Bible study on Thursday mornings. On one particular morning, we were talking about integrity and our commitment to holiness and to our Father's glory in our work. And he told me a story I will never forget. One of his men had gone out and given a quote on a job. Mike ended up finishing the job, and when it was all installed, told the man the finished price for the unit and the labor. The man was surprised. He told Mike that his employee had quoted him a price far less. That price, by the way, was less than the cost of the air conditioning unit itself. Mike went back to his employee and asked if that was the price that had been quoted. His employee said, "Yes, that's the price I gave." Mike had two choices. Would he stand behind his company's word and honor the quote, and in doing so honor God while at the same time losing money? Or would he change the price on the man, dishonor God, and make money? Or would he find a compromise and at least not lose money? Mike chose the first. Mike lost money on a job because he felt it would honor God more. Honoring God to Mike was a higher priority over being blessed financially by God. That's not what a cat would do. Why? Because cats reverse that priority. Cats put a far higher priority on God blessing them than they do on glorifying God. Sure, cats want to glorify God, but it's a secondary priority in their lives. How can God be glorified, they think? By blessing them, of course. They figure that God will get great glory when He blesses them. So in Mike's situation, a cat would pray, "Oh, dear Lord, please help him to see that I have to make money too. Please have him agree to pay the full price." They seek God to advance their bottom line even when it might not glorify God. And when God's glory points to something other than blessing, when God's glory says, "Hey, I want you to scale back. Don't get as big a house. Don't buy as nice a car or get as fast as a computer." A cat pauses to think about it and then hears a little voice in their mind saying,
"Boo! No way! That can't be! I don't think so."
"I don't think so, God." They conclude, "That must not have been God's voice. I see how you blessed Abraham. I love how you blessed David and Solomon. God must want me to be blessed as well." And as a result, they trust God for the nicer house, the bigger car, the faster computer, even possibly going into debt to do it. Why? Because they know that God wants to bless them. And when God's glory asks them to suffer, like Jesus did to reveal the Father's glory, like the Apostle Paul did to spread the gospel, a cat says,
"That's just not us."
"That's not me, God." Suffer? Suffer? Lord, I didn't give my life to you so I could suffer. God, I gave you my life because I knew you would bless me. God, give me the blessings. That's all I want. That's why I gave you my life. You don't want me to suffer, God, do you? Jesus suffered on the cross so I could be blessed by you. I shouldn't have to suffer too. When God's glory points to overseas, when they hear God saying, "Go to North Africa and proclaim my glory among the millions of Muslims who have never heard my name," cats really flip out. They quickly join Scott Wesley Brown in singing,
"Please don't send me to Africa. I don't think I've got what it takes."
"I don't think I've got what it takes, God. North Africa? Come on, Lord. I could never make it there. You know, I did that short-term trip once and it made me feel very uncomfortable. And you know, I took languages, Lord. I took Latin and flunked it because it was a dead language. Then I took French, hoping for something easier, and I almost killed that language. And Lord, what about the food? I don't even do Taco Bell. And I've heard those Arabs, they eat with their fingers. No, God, please, don't send me overseas. But I tell you what, I'll make you a deal.
I'll serve you here in suburbia in my comfortable middle-class life.
Just give me a comfortable middle-class life, God. I'll serve you here in my suburbia. God, I'll work with the youth. I'll tithe 11%. I'll do whatever it takes. Just keep me warming this pew. Why do cats freak out? Because they are primarily concerned about themselves. Between asking the question, "What do I get out of it?" and between their autofill and auto-summarize and an incomplete theology, cats find it very difficult to hear God's voice. Although they live for the glory of God, it's not their first priority. They have emphasized being blessed by God more than living for His glory. Now, I want you to see one more area where it is really tricky to see the differences. Both cats and dogs want their churches to grow, and they want everything to be done in a holy manner. But a cat can place church growth as a higher priority over God's holy ways. And then things can really come out wrong. For a cat, if people are attending church, then they are growing, and that is good for them and good for the church. So they do whatever they can to be sure that people stay in church, even if God's laws need to be bent just a little. After all, they're staying in church, it's good. For a dog, it's reversed. God's laws are a higher priority than church growth. And they fully believe that the needs of the people will be met and the church will survive if they follow God's holy ways. Let me give you an example of what could happen in a church. Suppose there was a church where the senior pastor wanted to let go of the worship pastor, not for performance of duties, doctrine, or lifestyle, but because they just couldn't seem to get along. An interpersonal relationship problem. But while the senior pastor couldn't get along with the man, many in the congregation loved the worship pastor greatly. Knowing a church conflict would ensue if he arbitrarily fired the worship pastor, the senior pastor decides to use varying kinds of pressure on the man to let him know he is not welcome. Feeling unwanted, the worship pastor confides in a friend from the congregation. Soon the word slips out that there is a problem between the two pastors. Upon hearing this through the grapevine, the senior pastor immediately accuses the worship pastor of insubordination without even meeting him. This causes a murmuring within the office staff. He then puts the worship pastor on a paid leave of absence and announces to the congregation on Sunday morning that gross violations were done by the worship pastor and that he is asking for his resignation. His email and cell phone are cut off and his office is locked without him even knowing it. The church is in shock and questions the wisdom and the actions of the leadership. Yet the worship pastor won't resign, believing it isn't God's will. The process drags out. He remains on paid leave of absence. Over the following months, large numbers of people leave the church out of disappointment. The senior pastor blames the situation on the worship pastor's insubordination, yet the worship pastor sees those leaving as God's way of disciplining the church for the unbiblical actions taken. As the blame game continues, the church falls further and further into greater destabilization. Maybe you've gone through experiences similar to this. These are perfect situations which expose the primary heart of a cat and a dog. So let's pause and find out what those concerns are. Cats focus on whatever it takes to keep people from leaving the church. Their primary concern is about the church growing, or another way of saying it, making sure people don't leave. This is what drives cat pastors and cat elders. Their motto is, do whatever needs to be done to minimize the damage. It's all about the church and its people. Dog pastors and elders have a different focus. They are primarily worried about righteousness and justice, the holiness of God. They want to be sure no scriptural principles have been violated and that God has had full opportunity to do what He wants. They seek to ensure that all parties are reconciled because God's holiness demands it of them. And what if people leave? It's possible, maybe even probable. But their motto is, was God pleased with how we handled the situation? Were all of His holy ways met? Were we holy in the process? This will be their cry, while at the same time trying to do everything they can to honor everyone concerned, the leadership, the individual involved, and the church family. The key words here are primary and secondary. Is it primarily about the church or primarily about God's holiness? That's the difference between the heart of a cat and a dog. Cats put a higher emphasis on the needs of the church, the people. They want God to be glorified, but not if people are going to leave. Then they'll slide on God's holiness for the sake of the needs of the church and its people. Dogs flip that around. They want God's holiness to be lived out, no matter what the cost. If people leave, they leave. Their primary concern was, did we honor God and glorify Him in everything we did? Woman, without her, man is nothing. Woman without her man is nothing. two different Christianities based on who the main character of the Bible is. They look so similar, but they can be so far apart. It can result in two different churches, two different pastors, two different elders, two ways of running a business, two different types of worship songs. Is it about people or is it about God? Make sure you have your right emphasis in the right place.